The back door clicks shut. The latch falls into place with a heavy, muffled thud, sealing the heavy oak against its frame. Inside, the house settles into the familiar hum of afternoon quiet. The air smells faintly of old paper, roasted coffee, and quiet dust motes dancing in slanting rays of light. Through the double-paned glass of the kitchen window, the garden looks like a postcard of suburban Pisa-manicured patch of emerald grass, a scattering of fallen autumn leaves catching the breeze, and a wooden feeder hanging motionless from the gnarled limb of an old apple tree. To anyone standing inside that room, the space beyond the glass is empty. It's just a backdrop, a picture frame, a canvas of inert nature designed to soothe the human eye. Except the moment that deadbolt turns, an invisible barrier lifts. There's a microsecond of total silence, a suspended breath where the air itself seems to hold still, waiting for the echo of human footsteps to fade down the hallway, and then a sharp two-tone click cuts through the quiet from the upper branches of the maple tree. It's not a song. Honestly, it's a coordinate, a status report broadcast across an invisible acoustic grid. Within 3 seconds, the geometry of the garden shifts. From the dense shadows of the perimeter hedging, a shape detaches itself. It doesn't hop with casual abandon. It drops with calculated, heavy precision onto the top rail of the fence. A second later, a flash of slate gray cuts across the lawn, landing silently inches from the empty seed tray. They haven't appeared from nowhere. They were already there, pressed flat against the bark, tucked under the overhang of the gutter, or hidden inside the thicket of the bushes, holding their breath, waiting for the human footprint to vanish from the landscape. You think you know what happens in your yard when you turn your back. You believe the space goes dormant, waiting for your return, holding its breath like a paused movie. You are entirely alone out there, or so you tell yourself as you move deeper into the house. Yet, as you walk down the hallway to check your phone or pour a glass of water, a complex, high-stakes drama is detonating just 4 feet from your kitchen sink. And honestly, it's a world governed by ancient rivalries and territorial boundaries so ruthlessly enforced that human urban planning looks gentle by comparison. The garden you own on paper doesn't belong to you in practice. You're merely the landlord funding a hidden microeconomy, subsidizing a society that operates on rules we're only beginning to decode. And the moment you lock that back door, the true owners take over. Watch the fence line closely. If you stand entirely still by the window long enough for your presence to fade from the immediate memory of the canopy, you begin to notice the timing. Birds don't move randomly. Their motion is dictated by an invisible, synchronized clockwork. The smaller visitors that crowd the tray during your morning breakfast routine are gone. They didn't fly away because they were full. They vanished because their shift ended. A strict, invisible curfew governs the airspace of your yard. The morning foragers yield the territory precisely as the midday patrols take position. Notice the way a single larger silhouette lands on the highest point of the roofline. It doesn't look for food. It scans the perimeter. It tilts his head, catching the reflection of the sun off your upper story windows, checking for the warm, blurred signature of human life behind the glass. For decades, we've looked at these creatures through the comforting lens of children's books and pastoral paintings. We paint them as gentle, simple-minded bundles of instinct drifting on the wind, singing because the sun is warm. We assume their world is reactive, innocent, and small. But spend an hour watching them without letting them see your face, and the illusion starts to fray at the edges, revealing the raw machinery underneath. You notice a small visitor land near a suet cage. Another bird approaches one that looks identical to the untrained eye. There's no cheerful chirping, no welcoming twitter. Instead, the newcomer drops its head, flares its tail feathers into a sharp fan, and emits a low rattle that human ears barely register. The first bird doesn't yield. It puffs its chest, exposing a patch of feathers hidden moments before. They're communicating in frequencies and postures designed to show absolute dominance. It's a negotiation backed by the threat of real aggression. And then, this is the part people miss. They aren't just reacting to the environment, they're reading it. Every crack in your mortar, every knot in your wooden fence, and every shadow cast by your patio umbrella has been mapped, categorized, and assigned a tactical value in an ongoing territorial war. You thought your yard was a sanctuary. It's an active zone of occupation. The boundary lines of this world are invisible to our eyes, but they're carved into the air with absolute permanence. If you map the movements of a single pair of territorial residents over 48 hours, you discover an intricate web of invisible fences. A specific bird will never cross an imaginary line running from your garden shed to the base of the oak tree. Why? Because crossing it means instant war. A few days ago, a young challenger tested that boundary. It wasn't some loud, messy fight. It was cold, silent, and honestly, terrifyingly efficient. The resident male didn't even chase the intruder, he just intercepted it mid-air. He drove his beak straight up, not aiming for flesh, but hitting a calculated angle to throw off the rival's balance, sending it crashing right into the prickly thorns of the pyracanthem bush down below. No song, no warning chirp, just a swift clinical enforcement of the rules. Zoom out from your little patch of grass and you realize your whole neighborhood is stitched together by these overlapping micro-spires. Every tree is basically a watchtower. Every fence post is a border checkpoint. And that bird feeder you hung up, it's not just a feeder, it's an economic prize. A massive cache of high-calorie energy that can flip the balance of power between rival syndicates overnight. When you toss out a handful of mixed seeds, you're doing some sweet act of wildlife conservation. You're basically dropping high-value currency right into a volatile black market. Watch how the dominant pair handles that resource. They don't just gorge themselves blindly. Instead, they run this rotating monopoly. One bird eats while the other sits high up on the copper rain gutter, scanning the horizon for hawks or rival spies. When some smaller, desperate visitor swoops in for a quick sunflower seed, the sentinel on the roof doesn't dive right away. It waits. It waits for the exact second the intruder drops its guard, locks onto it, and executes this blindingly fast flank maneuver, driving the interloper straight into the neighbor's dense hedge. It's an economy built on extortion and resource denial. The birds you're feeding in the afternoon? They're usually the exact same ones that spent the morning systematically driving every weaker competitor out of a 3-block radius. They've calculated the exact caloric cost of chasing an enemy versus the reward of the food you're giving them. They're literally running cost-benefit analyses with a precision that would impress a Wall Street trader, and all of that is packed inside a skull the size of a marble. And while you're sitting inside typing away or watching TV, they're outside your window, managing the real estate values of your backyard down to the square inch. As the afternoon sun starts dipping behind the rooftops, casting long skeletal shadows across the lawn, the whole vibe in the garden shifts again. The frantic, bustling energy of the midday food rush just evaporates. The air gets heavier, cooler. The small, colorful songbirds retreat deeper into the undergrowth, locking themselves safely inside the evergreen branches. Yet the garden is far from empty. In fact, what happens next is easily the most unsettling part. Out of the fading light, new actors arrive. They're darker, larger, and they move with this deliberate, unhurried arrogance. They don't hop around with the frantic energy of the morning finches. They walk across the grass with measured strides, their dark obsidian eyes fixed right on the ground, hunting for micro-movements in the soil. These are the covert operatives of the canopy, the corvids, and their sharp-eyed relatives. To watch them is to realize that your movements inside the house are not as hidden as you think. Stand by the window and raise your hand to adjust the blind. Just do it slowly. Up on the high-voltage power line cutting right across your yard, a dark silhouette shifts instantly. A heavy head turns. A sharp, glossy eye locks onto the exact pane of glass where you are standing. They know you are there. Honestly, they know who you are. Behavioral studies have proven what backyard observers have long suspected. These birds actually possess individual facial recognition capabilities. They don't just see a generic human shape behind the glass. They catalog your distinct features, remember your daily schedule, and evaluate your mood based on the speed and cadence of your movements. If you walked out yesterday and startled them, here's what most people don't realize, that memory is currently being broadcast across the neighborhood network through a complex, multi-layered acoustic syntax. They are talking about you. Listen closely. Beyond the distant hum of traffic, this low, rasping call echoes right out of the neighbor's chimney. And then it's answered 3 houses down by a sharper, higher click. It's basically an unbroken chain of communication stretching across miles of suburban asphalt and intelligence network operating right above our heads to turning every single move we make into survival data. Every time you step outside, you're triggering a whole cascade of invisible assessments. Are you carrying food? Do you have a tool? Are you a threat? Or just a clumsy, predictable giant whose habits can be used for a quick meal? You probably think you're the observer here. You sit at your desk, look out at nature, and feel totally safe behind your insulated glass. Honestly, you're the specimen. You're the focal point of a continuous, sophisticated surveillance operation run by minds that have mastered the art of hiding right in plain sight. The light drains completely from the sky now, leaving the garden in this deep, bruised violet. Shadows stretch across the grass, blurring the lines between the lawn, the flower beds, and the dark wall of the hedge. For the longest time, we've suffered from this comforting narcissism. We built our cities, paved our roads, and fenced our yards, convincing ourselves we'd conquered the wild, that nature had been pushed out to distant national parks or wild reserves. We look at a suburban backyard like it's our own creation, just a harmless extension of the living room. Yet, standing here in the deepening twilight, looking out at the silent, swinging bird feeder, the massive arrogance of that idea just dissolves into thin air. The wild never actually left. It just learned how to wear feathers that match our gardens. It learned how to nest in our gutters, eat our discarded scraps, and turn our manicured lawns into hunting grounds. It adapted, evolved, and slipped into our daily lives with a quiet, ruthless efficiency that completely bypassed us. While we were busy stressing over our bills, our schedules, and our screens, a whole parallel civilization was thriving just inches away from our skin. A civilization with its own politics, its own wars, its own intelligence networks, and its own unyielding rules of survival. They don't need our permission to be here. They just tolerate us, using our blind spots, our generosity, and our total ignorance to fuel their own ancient, unchanging agenda. The glass feels thinner now. The dark shape of tree branches pressing against the window starts to look different, not just a peaceful part of the landscape, but the perimeter wall of an alien world you happen to share. Tomorrow morning, the sun will rise. The mist will burn off the grass. The kettle will whistle on your stove, and you'll walk down the hallway with your morning coffee, feeling the warm, safe floorboards under your bare feet. You'll look out the kitchen window, just like you do every single day. The wooden feeder will be swinging gently in the pale morning breeze. A small, colorful bird will drop down from the sky, tilt its head with that familiar, innocent charm, and peck casually at a sunflower seed. You will smile, thinking nothing of it. Honestly, you'll probably just believe you're watching a harmless little creature brought right to your window by the simple grace of nature. And as you stand there, just watching them through the glass, they'll look right back at you, calculating, assessing, and whispering coordinates across the canopy. And this is the part people miss. They are completely aware that you still have no idea what is actually happening in your own backyard.